Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you may be right now. Thank you so much for coming with us and finding us as we have kind of changed rooms and are navigating so many different changes in this world currently. So I know everyone has kind of had a lot of impacts with COVID-19 and just different things happening. So we do really, really appreciate you still being here with us and taking time out to be part of our presentation. So I am Dr. Nicole Arcuri Sanders. I am core faculty over at Capella University. And this is a topic that has been of extreme importance to a previous doc supervisee of mine, Erika's. And I'm going to have her just kind of introduce herself and tell you a little bit about how this topic came to be and why we're here today.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Erika Hill. I am a counselor educator, education and supervision doctoral candidate at Capella University. And so the topic today is African American women's PTSD likely to be untreated. And so this presentation is just more so to just give you a deep understanding on the barriers that a lot of African American women face when they're seeking counseling, and ways that you can support that positive change for them, and ways that you can advocate for this marginalized population. So Dr. Arcuri, you want to get started?
Perfect. Thank you, Erika. All right, so bear with me. I'm going to try to push the next button. We are currently having power outages where I am living, so I got everything kind of on backup here. So if I pop in and out, it's because I'm working off of a phone, so I just want to apologize in advance. As Erika kind of just got us started a little bit, she had noted that there's barriers. And so part of today's session, we want to focus on ensuring that everybody leaves here understanding what some of those barriers look like for specifically African American women when they are seeking counseling services. Also, we are hoping to have you guys leave with some context in regards to cultural influences that would allow for a positive self-image for African American women. And then lastly, we want to focus on kind of what we can do with this information. So learning how to advocate and actively seek mental health opportunities for this marginalized group. As we go through, please feel free to, chat in the chat box. If something stands out to you, we'd love to dialogue with you. And also at the end, we're definitely going to open up the floor to have conversation about this topic and what your experience has been and, possible strategies you've used to not only advocate, but to break down those barriers. And then any implications that you have currently faced in your community with this topic. So, to get started, just going to look at the background information a little bit. So research actually shows that African American women who have been experiencing post-traumatic disorder or PTSD, right, that they've actually faced race-based trauma. So this is something really important to consider when looking at those symptoms with this clientele, right? So PTSD, we see it in the DSM-5 diagnoses. We understand what criteria is. However, with this specific population, the actual experience of having this traumatic event has been associated, something directly connected to their race. So this is something really important when we are not only as clinicians working with our clientele, but when we are supervising supervisees and we are working with interns, or when we are just talking about what our program is going to look like at a site when we have this specific population, because we are thinking about the context. So this really is really important because sometimes when clients first come in, they don't necessarily give us the full picture, right? They tell us their symptoms, they say what's going on, but they don't really jump into the details. And that's kind of our job to find the context of it. So I just want to stress that from the beginning, that is, what research is showing us. This is the findings, and it's not something initially noted from the very top. So furthermore, other considerations when thinking about African American women, specifically women, that's the other thing I want to just keep bringing out here, is that gender difference, is that women are taught that family and religious structures, that any kind of mental health kind of concern, that stress, it's a sign of weakness, right? And it's a lack of religious faith. So these two things, these cultural contexts right there, creates this cognitive conditioning. Consider consequences versus rewards, like behaviorism, right? So they are conditioned to believe that this is not a good thing to do, that mental health services is a stigma. Do not seek this, because if I seek this treatment, it is a sign of weakness for me, and others are going to believe that I have a lack of religious faith. Also, right, if we don't want to think about the behaviorism aspect of it, we can think about social learning considerations, right? So this is kind of a social construct of how they are experiencing culturally their perceptions of what mental health is. And the next thing that we want to just talk about, that there seems to be a high rate for severe mood disorders and depressions in comparison to white women, right? But they are less likely to seek mental health treatment. So we talked a little bit because of the cultural component of it. However, we also know that there's race-based trauma experienced. So these are really important things for us to know as clinicians when working with the specific population. Sorry, let's see. Oh, there we go. All right.
Okay.
So Erika,
So,
can you sit? Thank you.
yes. So to further elaborate on what Dr. Arcuri was talking about, those barriers that African American face. So many African American women use unhealthy coping strategies if therapy is unable to be done by someone that looks like them. So what does that mean? A lot of African American women, if they do decide to get counseling, they're going to prefer an African American woman counselor. And that is because they feel that a non-African American woman counselor will not understand the stigmatization or the barriers amongst African American women in counseling. So an example of that is, it's almost like, if you do not look like me, how will you be able to understand me? How would you be able to guide my experiences if you do not have the same experience as me? And so if they can't find someone who's going to be able to relate, that looks like them, that goes through what they go through, they feel like that person can't help them. And so they have that barrier. If they don't find a counselor that looks like them, then they're definitely not going to try and seek counseling sources. Even research has stated by Watson and Hunter that a lot of African American women are encouraged in family structures to deal with stress internally and to be cautious when they're sharing that vulnerability to outside sources such as counseling. So a lot of African American women are often misdiagnosed and misguided when seeking counseling in their communities. Often advice that is given to African American women from their family structure is to pray about it. Pray about it is the ultimate response that a lot of African American women get when they express to family, like, hey, I'm feeling depressed, or I'm not feeling like myself. They'll tell you to pray about it. Go get your Bible and read it. Go to church. You're not going to church enough. You know what? You miss a Bible study. That's why you're feeling like that. And so a lot of African American women are misguided because now they feel that it's a lack in their religious structure and not just, I just need some professional assistance in what I'm going through. A lot of African American women are told that what happens in your house stays in your house. And this is actually something that is taught when you're a child. You're taught that you are not allowed to share what is going on in your home. So if that's trauma, if that's sexual trauma, if that's abuse, neglect, African American women are taught that you do not share what goes on in your home. And that also goes back to that race-based trauma. So for a lot of African American families and homes, they were taught that if you share what's happening in the home, it will be used against you. You will be looked at as a a less of a structured family. And so if you share that, then people will know that we don't have it all together, when actually they're just misdiagnosing and misguiding African American women that you should share when something's not right in your home. Another thing that African American women are taught through family, through community resources, through media, is to be that strong Black woman. It's in the music, it's in magazines, it's in the books. And so when you express that, hey, I'm an African American woman and I'm not feeling okay, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling trauma, you're supposed to represent this strong Black woman. And so when you seek help, that barrier is you're no longer strong. And so a lot of African American women are given this cape at birth, where they have to keep this cape on. And if they get counseling, you're taking that cape off. And so now that looks at like a weakness because you're no longer wearing that cape. So this is examples of barriers that a lot of African American women are getting from their community and getting from their family structures. And as a result, they're being misdiagnosed and misguided instead of getting that effective professional help. Sorry, I'm trying to transition to the next slide. I don't think I'm able to on my end.
Sorry, there we go. It's thinking. I think with everyone being homeschooled in my area right now and everyone working from home, the internet it's getting stressed today. So
I think we all can understand. We're just trying to all make it work virtually, right? So African American women, that cultural influence for positive African American image. So African American women receiving positive validation from counseling professionals on their individuality, on their experiences as African American women, and how they interpret their worldview. So how does that influence that positive image? Well, it shows that someone that doesn't look like me is willing to understand me. And as a result, that shows that I am enough to be understood. Someone cares to understand me. Even if they don't know me, they want to understand what I go through. They care what I go through. And if I take this cape off, that strong Black woman cape, they're willing to understand that I've had to wear this cape, and they're willing to understand why it's so hard to take it off. Counseling professionals
Erika,
partner. Yes?
I'm sorry.
Yes?
I'm just gonna piggyback off of that real fast because we had some comments in the chat, and it was, talking about that idea, well, what if I don't look like them, right? So one of the comments says, I'm a white female, I don't look like them. How are they going to react to me? And Erika really brought up a great point here. Anyone can do this, right? It doesn't matter what your skin color is, what your background is. It's giving them the opportunity to know that you are there to validate them, right? If you look at me, right, my skin color is not dark. So obviously when that client comes in, I may be judged, right, immediately. From this research, they may come in and say, I don't know yet. So I might have to go the extra mile to really let them know that I am a non-judgmental and I am here to hear their experience, and also to let them know that I've done my homework, right? That I want to know about their background, their experience. But also the biggest thing here for us, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later in regards to the codes of ethics, is the fact that us as counselors ethically and professionally should be looking at every culture. So this is no different than any other client we have who may be different from us. But knowing this research, knowing that they're going to be timid when they come and we look different than them, we just need to take extra steps to make sure that they feel that they are being empathized with, that they are being validated, and that their perspective, their worldview is first and foremost, that our experience is completely removed. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into it. I just saw that there was a lot of comments in that area. So just kind of hang in there. And then once we start to look at the interventions and strategies, we're definitely going to open up the floor. And if you have any, questions, comments, and if you guys want to process anything, we'd be glad to do that. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Dr. Ray, and I'm glad that you guys are asking those questions because, yeah, transparency and just even saying like, "Hey, I don't know." It helps that client when they come in to remove their mask of having to be that strong Black woman, and you having to remove that mask of feeling like you have to know it all. As you know, as professionals, we sometimes have to do that minimal self-disclosure, and sometimes that comes with transparency of just saying like, hey, I may not know it all, but I want to know. And that goes back to building that positive image of like, hey, someone that doesn't look like me is willing to get to know me, and they're willing to show that I'm enough, and they're willing to remove their mask and say, hey, I don't know. So now I can remove my mask of having to be that strong Black woman, and I could still be that Black woman. I could still be strong and still get that professional help and be myself. Another way, and this could also go towards that question, counseling professionals partnering with faith-based or community organizations to reach African American women for mental health services. So going in their communities, because when a lot of African American women see that counseling is connected with a religious structure of theirs or a spiritual structure or someone in their community, they now realize that I am not a sinner if I get counseling after prayer. And so it builds that positive image that I can still have my religious values and still go get counseling because my church offered this, or the nonprofit community resource in my neighborhood offered this. So wow, you know what? I'm not a sinner. I'm not less of a religious person. I'm still aligned to my religious values, even if I go to counseling. And so that builds that positive image that I could still be all of me while still getting support while being me. Another way is just understanding understanding African American women's reality that is influenced by experiences of racism and sexism. So a lot of African American women are dealing with two barriers: the barrier of number one, being a woman, and the second barrier of being Black. And so having the experiences of racism and having the experiences of sexism, a lot of African American women get both ends of the stick in a way. And so how you can build that positive image is, number one, understanding that it's a barrier, admitting that it's a barrier. Wow, you're faced with two different things. You're faced with being an African, and you're dealing with the experiences of being a woman. So you're allowing them to not feel like what they're feeling is not real. You're allowing them to know like, hey, I see it, it's real, and your feelings are valid. Your feelings of feeling like, hey, I'm getting hit by both ends are valid. Another way that you influence that positive image is that you're letting them know that I could still be strong and get support mentally and emotionally, because they understand that I'm dealing with a lot. And that though I'm strong and I can handle it, doesn't mean I have to bear all the weight of the world on my own. I can get support for what I'm going through. And last but not least, it lets African American women know that I am worthy of being understood. And that goes back to that race-based trauma. When I mentioned earlier that with race-based trauma, a lot of African American families do not share what's going on in their household out of fear that it will be used against them. And so by you admitting or expressing that you understand both barriers, in a way that influences African American women, that you will not use what you hear from me to use it against me, but to only support me and to help me and to advocate for me. And so in a way, it's like you're extinguishing that race-based trauma, that though I may not look like you, I still want to be there for you. Make transition. So those advocacy efforts, and this goes to answer that question like, well, what do I do if I don't look like my client? What do I do where they come in and they see I don't look like them? How can I advocate for them? So ethically, counselors are expected to advocate to promote changes for them as an individual, institutional, and societal levels. And this is to overall improve that quality of life for them and to remove potential barriers, so that way they can get the appropriate services that are being offered to them. And so that What that looks like is just using multicultural competency. And that is having the awareness that, hey, they're hit with a lot of barriers. And this is why it's such a impediment for them to seek counseling. Having the knowledge of those barriers. Don't just say you know they have barriers, understand it and have that knowledge. So then that way, when they share those experiences, you're able to truly guide them. And last but not least, having the skills that comes with that professional development, enhancing your skills to better understand that population. Furthering what Dr. Arcuri was saying, that as counselors, we are ethically responsible to know all cultures. And so having the proper skills that even when they walk through the door, yes, you may not know everything, but you have some skills to at least get them through the door and comfortable and build that therapeutic rapport.
Yeah, Erika, I'm just going to piggyback on that. Erika brought up a really great point here about the idea of
Yeah, because there's
not
no way
having to
if you're that
be,
pregnant
oh,
and
I'm sorry.
then somebody with some sense look at it and be like, oh no, this is a tumor.
Oh,
Oh, I think someone's not on mute.
yep, is somebody talking? I'm sorry. All right, so let me try that again. Okay, so the part that I was trying to talk about, what that Erika was saying that was really important to consider, is the fact that, right, we ethically are responsible to be culturally competent. But Erika brought up the great point that we don't need to know everything. And right, we cannot be expected to know every single thing about every culture out there. The more work, the more exposure, the more experience we have with the culture, the more we are going to know them. But the biggest thing to remember is that even though you might have all of this research, all of this experience, every individual is unique. So just because you are part of a population, you are not defined by that population, right? You might have attributes and characteristics that are going to help the counselor, you, to work with this client, to understand their worldview, to understand their experiences. However, you do not need to know every little thing about them before they walk in, because their story is unique. They're going to tell you their story. They're going to offer you a lens that may differ from another client that you have in this population. So I know Erika was talking about the research with the connection with having religious and spiritual kind of to partner, right? Because that is seen, if I go this route, I am not a sinner, right? It is okay. So knowing that is a great stepping stone. However, if somebody had a really bad religious, spiritual experience, perhaps in their childhood, you will understand that and you will know maybe that's not the route to go right now. So you may need to adjust your steps. So every client is unique in itself. And that is just something that, you know, going back to the question in the beginning of, you know, what if I look different? Providing them, whether you look the same or different, with that opportunity to be able to have their story validated, to have them heard, and to not have them just be, I always put categorized, right? We're not just a population. We are individuals too, and that's important. And you can be a strong individual and also need help, but your story matters, is going to be a great way to segue in to working with any client despite their population. However, as Erika said, with this population, there's certain considerations, just like any other population, that are going to help us segue in. So I just kind of wanted to bring that back to the forefront, because I know sometimes you know, we get so worked up around, well, I've never worked with them. And I think about all these interns I've had along the way, thinking even clinical mental health, you know, field work, right? So they're graduate students, their first time going out, and, you know, it's like deer in headlights sometimes when they say, I had this client for the first time, I didn't know what to do. And it goes back to those foundational skills. They knew exactly what to do to get it started, right? That biopsychosocial, that intake is going to be so important. And then this comes in, right? Knowing the person, going and doing more homework to make sure that you are better assisting them. We cannot be experts. So that is also why our ACA Code of Ethics tell us that we are supposed to always evolve and continually professionally develop, because we don't know it all and we're always going to develop. So just to piggyback off of that, to, you know, hopefully if you're thinking, oh no, I don't know about that, to alleviate any concerns.
Thank you, Dr. Kari. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that even wanted me to further elaborate that this presentation is not just for people who are non-minorities or non-African American. This is also for counselors who are African American and counselors who are African American women, because Dr. Arcuri made a very good point. We're all unique and we're all different, and skin color does not determine your multicultural competency. You still have to do the work. You still have to understand the barriers. And then, yes, it may give you more of an understanding of the experience, but it definitely still will not tell you the client and the trauma that they're facing. So everyone, despite the color of your skin, despite your culture, you still need to get that professional development and do the work to understand your client when they walk in that door. So some other advocacy efforts when seeking mental health opportunities for this marginalized group. So further elaborating, so since many African-American women prefer an African-American woman as a counselor due to feeling like a non-African-American woman counselor would understand what they're going through, resources that, you know, counselors can provide, it's a referral list, making a referral list to show, okay, well, hey, if you don't feel comfortable with me, well, here's a referral list of people that you may feel comfortable, counselors you do feel comfortable. And that's just that transparency, because as counselors, our overall goal is not to obtain a bunch of clients. Our overall goal is the wellness and helping our clients and helping that population. So overall, we just want to make sure that we give them the best resources, even if that's not you. And so having that referral list is a great way to show them like, okay, well, if you prefer a counselor that looks like you, here is a list. Furthermore, it allows African American women to see that someone that looks like them is a counselor. And that is big, because what that shows is, wow, what I'm so afraid of and what I feel shame of even doing, someone that looks like me is a professional in this field. So it must not be bad. I must not be a sinner. I must not, you know, I'm not throwing away my religious values. I'm not looked at as less of a strong woman. So having that referral list in a way not only will support the notion that it's okay to get counseling, it will also help them build that rapport with someone that doesn't look like them, because then they'll see, wow, this person gets it. So they're not upset that I want someone that looks like me. Wow, they must get it. Well, you know what? Let me just stay here with that counselor. So a referral list can act and advocate in so many different ways. Number one, you're giving them their preference. Number two, you're giving them a mirror that someone that looks like them is in this profession. And three, you're allowing them to know that, hey, this person cares. Despite if I come to them, they still want me to get help. So that ultimately means they want to support me. Research and psychoeducation, understanding the concerns your client is going with. So just being transparent and addressing the cultural influences attached to the shame and seeking mental health treatment. So just being transparent and saying like, hey, I know the shame that you face being here. And of course, there's different ways that you can say it to make it sound, you know, more comfortable for the client, but just admitting that you understand that this was a lot for them to be there can be a sigh of relief for African American women when they walk through the door, because a lot of them are walking through that door with that cape. And they're walking through with still that mask of, I have to be strong, even in the counselor's seat. So by you addressing that mask will allow them to feel like, wow, I can take it off. They understand that racism and that sexism that I face. They understand that this cape that I have to wear, now I could take it off and be myself and get that help. So again, going back to that transparency of just saying, hey, I don't know it all, but I do know that you go through this, or tell me more, share with me your experiences so I can learn more. How has this been for you? These are ways that you can engage and spark that conversation for them to realize like, wow, they understand the shame of me being here. They understand that barrier of me being here. Last but not least, this definitely goes for all counselors, no matter the color of your skin or your culture, being genuine, being authentic, open, and non-judgmental. These are key in advocating for that population. Again, you're allowing them to take off that mask, take off that cape, and be themselves and realize they're not weak. They're not going against their family or religious structures. They're not sharing information that will be used against them. They can now just be genuinely themselves and get the help that they need. And so when you give them that person-centered therapy, this is a way for you to even grow with your client. This is a way for you to really step in their worldview and say, hey, I don't know it all, but share with me more. I want to know more. I want to support you and be there for you. I want to understand your experiences. No, I've never gone through that, but please share with me how I can support you. So just being transparent, being genuine, being authentic, and that you don't know will allow them that you're not just sitting there trying to make believe that you know. You really don't know, but you want to know. And so using these types of resources to advocate will just build that rapport and really advocate for this group to seek counseling.
Goodness, to pick right up from where Erika just left off, I am seeing so many sessions kind of flash through my eyes right now where a client has challenged me, right? Because I've looked different, I am different, to ask me, how can I help them? And I even think about working with some of my interns, and this is really difficult for a lot of, new ones like practicum students. This idea, right, that you might not be capable and having to fight that internally, but also still help this client. In this scenario, I just kind of want to warn, Erika did such a great point, and I saw there's lots of dialogues, everyone loved the idea of the masks, the capes, and, it's true, right? We're asking somebody to really kind of come in and reveal themselves. We're allowing them to kind of shelter themselves, but we're giving them an opportunity to reveal themselves. So what happens when we get challenged, though, and someone says, well, how are you going to be able to? Right? We are trained as clinicians, and we train our students to go back to the client and ask them what that means for them. Well, we know with this population, with the research out there, that having somebody that looks like them is extremely powerful, right? Not only knowing, as Erika had mentioned, that somebody can be in the field as a helping professional, but also the fact that there is somebody out there who understands me. And we talked about that very first slide with the background, that idea of possible race-based trauma, right? So this kind of understanding gives them this equal playing field. The one thing that I caution, this is something, we caution all of students, we have to remind ourselves with self-awareness checks. We don't want to get in a situation with the client, if we don't look like them, where we are trying to sell ourselves or we are trying to prove our worth, right? We can discuss the situation, we address it, right? It's kind of like that elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. Let's point out the obvious and go from there. However, if you find that you or your intern are trying to defend your position and your capabilities, then there's some kind of countertransference there, right? So something's being triggered with you. So that this can happen with any population, but this is something specifically to be mindful when working with this population, because research is showing us that they do much better when someone looks like that, right? So we just need to be mindful of that. We don't take it personally if we don't look like them. We look at our research, we look at our information, and we want to make sure that we can, share that with them. That, I understand that, possibly having somebody that looks like you, you may feel more comfort. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What would that experience be like that for you? This is not a time where we have to one-up each other, right? I always tell my students as they're going out there, and they say, well, you've never been, let's say, for example, targeted because of your skin color. And, you don't have, the counselor doesn't go, I have been, let me tell you about, right? That is not what we need to do. We want to hear their experience, hear their story, and allow them to have an opportunity where you are able to empathize and validate for them. That goes back to the foundational point, right? Just sharing with them, hey, there is people out there that actually have your skin color and they may have had more experiences that are similar to you, and they are counselors. By you even doing that homework, that already tells them that you are empathizing with them. You are meeting their needs. You are validating their concerns. So you may actually have a client who wanted to maybe go to somebody else, possibly even stay with you now because of the fact that they believe that you really are there for their well-being. So that is just something to take into consideration. I know we are in it for everyone's well-being, right? And I think a lot about some of, especially I'm thinking about with everything going on with COVID-19, right? I know there's been a lot of interns specifically that have been impacted with site closures. And I've heard a lot from some clinicians out there in private practice saying, I don't know if I'm able to keep my doors open after this. The same is happening for some nonprofits. You know, if this grant doesn't come through or this doesn't happen, I don't know what we're going to be able to do, right? So everything is kind of in this period of unknown right now. So the idea too of seeing a client walk out the door, right, and you're thinking about billable hours and different things like that, I can completely understand that that might be a real fear of yours, right? First and foremost, ACA Code of Ethics, A1A, we always need to do the well-being of our clients first and foremost. However, the reality of if, you know, I don't keep clients, my doors are going to shut, what is that going to look like for me? So the biggest, you know, stressor that we can offer you in how to address this is truly being in the here and now, in the moment with these clients, and also allowing them to see you as a human, allowing them to see you validate them, and allowing you to be empathetic. So really being back to those foundational pieces, because as we know, if we think back to research, Carl Rogers, right, those foundational keys, just being heard sometimes is therapeutic enough. So this mask, this cape that Erika was talking about before, right, for a population who says, if I share with you, it's a sign of weakness, by them being heard and validated and you not calling them weak and you still telling them, hey, there is other people out there that look like you and they're counselors and they're in this field doing the good work, that right there makes them feel less of a victim and allowing to keep that strength that they've been so fearful to let go of. You know, and then you think about how can we start this? If you look at this slide, you know, continuing for those advocacy efforts, this can really start with also thinking about our counselor and training programs. So what I mean by that is having a diverse cohort, right? Having a student body that is diverse. They can learn from each other. When you have students in a room where they are kind of traveling in a program together and they look similar, they have the similar experiences, they don't really get to embrace learning from each other. Variances might be some minimal here and there. We're definitely changing into a more global world. I'm hoping that still will stay the same after COVID-19. I know everyone's kind of like, I don't know if I'm traveling, what's going on here. But, you know, I think about, you know, what it's been over the years of colleagues. In the beginning, it was, you know, this is where you started your license, this is where you stayed. I'm now seeing a big shift in that. You know, I see colleagues going all over the place and it's very exciting. However, the communities they work in is very different. So for example, for me, I started in New Jersey, right outside New York City. I went down to South Texas, completely different population, then went out to rural Pennsylvania, completely another population for me. And now I'm in coastal Carolina area, another population that I'm working with. So and everyone looks a little bit different. So I've been able to have that exposure, but if we can give that exposure to students during their training program, think about the conversations they can have, whether it's in their assessment courses, whether it's in their ethics courses, you know, internship, when they're case conceptualizing, skills courses, they have so much more context to pull from, right? And that's really the exciting thing. I know hybrid opportunities, distance programs are offering, right, for a lot more distance varied students, not everybody within a 2-hour radius to drive to classes. So that's exciting as well. And I know also that there is a lot of individuals that they just learn better in a face-to-face setting, right? They need that in the classroom, experience. So how can you diversify that a little bit more? Does everyone know about the opportunities that our field can provide? So thinking about recruitment, right? Who are we recruiting to? Are we going to the same universities? Maybe we need to extend and find some different areas, whether it's outside our tri-state area or normal. Perhaps somebody might want to move for a graduate program, right? If they really feel connected. So that's just really, a great thing to consider from the ground up, wherever you are involved in this. I see Dr. Tanisha Snap had mentioned that she's actually teaching multicultural now, and this is just, such a wonderful course to really immerse into and really getting deep into these dialogues. And then I see Karen had mentioned even the fact of faculty diversity, right? If you have a faculty and they all have the same research agendas, they all have the same interests, they all look alike, wow, that's really going to impact who your student dynamic is too. And it's also going to streamline, especially if you have a doc program, where their interests may be. So you really lose dialogue. You really lose looking at that, thinking about like case conceptualization. You want a deep, thorough case conceptualization. If everyone's thinking the same way, that's going to limit not only your work for yourself, but your work for clients. So, just thinking about all these ACA codes of ethics and different things, self-awareness, it's not just a one-time event, it's a stage process. So looking at our program development, looking at our own selves, looking at the colleagues, whether they're faculty or they're other clinicians we're with. So even when you're at a site and you're case conceptualizing at a site, does every colleague there, clinician-wise, kind of look like you? Do they have a same kind of thought process? Are you varied? Are you able to give more depth to those conversations? Are you able to walk away from those meetings with more? So tons and tons of things to consider here.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Arcuri, for sharing that about faculty and just like having a diverse faculty, because this made me even think by having that diversity, there's more presentations that look like this, where more people who are not the same culture or different cultures are able to learn and able to share experiences. And so if there's diversity, there's more presentations that look like this, there are more resources that look like this, and it will further educate everyone. So to open the floor, what has been your experience with this population? Comments, questions, what has it been like for you working with this population, or what resources have you used when working with this population?
I'm looking in the chat box, just trying to catch up here. And Latasha made a really, just kind of, it's simple in its nature, but sometimes we forget about it, right? Our social circle. Having that diversity can really be impactful to our own experience, our own self-awareness, our own perspectives. So I love that.
Yes, I agree, because you know what, I actually even mentioned like this experience of doing this presentation. So for example, doing this presentation with Dr. Arcuri, we do not look alike, but this was a way for us to both communicate on a culture that I'm a Black woman, I'm an African-American woman. And I was able to share this with her, and we were able to learn because I was able to see her perspective from things. She was able to see my perspective from things. So having that diversity in your social group can further the education for more people to understand. And then it makes it less uncomfortable for me to share it, because that's another thing that goes with African-American women, having to share the history lesson of why African-American women operate the way that they do. That is draining in itself. And so when you have a conversation where it's a healthy conversation, where someone really wants to learn and know, you feel comfortable sharing it. And then that is a way that you're no longer wearing that mask again, no longer wearing that cape. You are still strong in saying that, hey, this is going on with this marginalized population.
Hi, I had a question. One of my good friends, and she's actually a professor at Capella as well, Dr. Han Morrison, D. Han Morrison. And she wrote a book on Even Superwoman Needs to Cry Sometimes. And we talked about this book. And in this book, she talks about African-American women can have this really thick exterior, this bravado and what have you, and be really warm on the inside and whatnot. And I've seen this really take place with trauma treatment and what have you.
I have a question. I told Andrea a few days ago that I'd order a thickener and I forgot.
And my question
Please
is,
put yourself on mute if you're not speaking.
and my question is there a way, or is there a way that you recommend that's effective in getting through this dense exterior, this toughness?
Mm-hmm. Yes, admitting that you see that there's a toughness, admitting that you see that I can understand why you have this tough exterior. I can understand why this was hard for you to come here. Thank you for trusting me. Please share with me why this has been so tough for you. That goes back to that genuineness, that empathy, that transparency, and just admitting that you see that toughness. Because though a lot of African-American women know that that cape is on, it's a lot to share that I have this cape, because you want to automatically just show that you're strong. So just by showing them, hey, I know you have this tough exterior, it's like, wow, they see me for me and they want to know more. And that is just a way to open up the door. I'm not going to say that by you just sharing that automatically that exterior is going to go away, but I will say it opened the door. It will show that, wow, they see that exterior is there. So how long am I going to uphold this?
Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
And Andy Brown, I actually just left your session in regards to metaphors, and with Dr. Sarah Spencer. And, I'm kind of thinking of some of the words you were talking about with Erika here, how many metaphors can come out of this, right? Oh, yeah. Like working with this population, it could be a whole book in itself. So.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And just following up in the chat box, so we have a question here. Have you come across advocacy efforts focused on church embracing counseling? And something just to consider here when you're kind of looking at some of that research is there are some churches, right, that are more open than others, and they are more, they have more resources, I should say, too, to support this need. But also it thinks about the congregation, right? So it's kind of this experiential part of it again, because some congregations may have a pastor or a preacher who is more open to it, willing to it, and embracing of it. So that idea of having a conversation and then, gaining additional resources if needed really is a congregational kind of overhead. I kind of think of it like a mushroom, an umbrella. If it's not so much underneath that umbrella in the beginning and it's kind of pushed off, right, it's not going to be embraced as much. So that's something really to consider too, where you're located, what resources are there available, and what's the relationship with at that the congregation. It's going to be different for everybody with that experience. So knowing your community is really, really important. Because if your client says, I am interested in looking into more religious, supports, I think I would feel more comfortable that route. If we send them on a wild goose chase, right? And it's not going to help us. So knowing our community, knowing what's available to them, and even if we don't know yet, doing our work with them, helping our client to seek that, empower them to find something that would work for them. Considering COVID-19, right, this can be really interesting because things are changing. I know every state looks a little bit different right now. Some states are still allowed to have spiritual gatherings, others are not. But a lot of things are going to Zoom like we're doing. So that relationship looks different. I wonder, thinking about some of these conversations, is this going to maybe ease access, right? Because I don't have to walk in and tell somebody I'm having a hard time. I can reach out via the phone and talk to my pastor, and that might be less threatening for me because no one in my congregation is going to know that after the church service that I needed to go get an additional conversation, whether it was, about how I was going to help out or volunteer, or the fact that I might need some support right now. But everyone might see me. And that idea of seeing sometimes is a stigma in itself, specifically in this population, is saying, if it's associated with this mental health need, it's a sign of weakness. So not knowing how someone's going to react, it might be safer when you don't have to do it face to face. I don't know if you have anything else to add with that, Erika.
Yes, I'm actually glad that you brought up that whole like virtual and not having face to face. And this actually correlates with churches embracing counseling. So there's now Christian counseling sites where people can actually sign up for counseling, and it has a Christian base. And then for that shows that you could still have your religious values and structures and still get the counseling. In a way, it's bringing it together. So this is a way that you can also still advocate for those who do feel shame with coming face to face. Well, you can come virtually, and there's also Christian based counseling sites that you can use as well, so that you can still uphold the religious values that you do have and still get the professional support that you need. Going back to that whole, you can still pray and have a counseling session after.
And then I'm seeing other comments. I'm sorry, guys. I am trying to stay as quick on top of the chat box. Lots of good dialogue happening here. The idea of addressing other barriers so they can do that. So, right, having childcare available, right? It's women tend to be the primary caregiver. So if they can't get there, if they can't have that alone time, is that going to impede them more? So even looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That can really be applied here too, because if we don't meet those needs, they can't really address some of those wants, right? I want to be happier, but I need to take care of my children. And right now I am concerned with how and where we're going to sleep, or, who's going to watch them. I can't be concerned about what I want right now until that's addressed. So that is definitely going to be an aid if you're able to provide those things to break down barriers to getting people to walk in the door for you. And thank you so much. Andy had just provided a link in here for the American Association of Christian Counselors. Lots and lots of great resources here with that as well. So if you haven't had a time to look at that, I don't know if that's your field or not your field, or maybe now you're thinking, how can I incorporate this? It's a great resource where you can pull from. Also, they have local, regional kind of, I don't want to say it's like listservs you can sign up for. So you can get connected to more of your regional area where you can find out more resources more locally found.
Yes, Dr. Curry, I did see something in the chat, Dr. Sapp. I'm so glad you brought this up. Do not just think that it's just one religion. When working with African-American women, because of the diaspora, there's a lot of African-American women who have Caribbean influences, West Indian influences, a lot of things that contribute. So not just only just learning just, you know, African-American women where you're from, but just learning all parts of the culture of African-American women, because those also have their own barriers in themselves as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Oh, and I see a comment here from Veronica. So it's funny you kind of asked that question here in regards to veterans. So my area of research and where my passion of advocacy has been working with the military population. So it's interesting to think about that additional context. So when we look at military, it's a whole nother culture on its own, right? And now we also have this idea of being an African-American woman, right? So you have these two different cultures, but one person. And their experience now is going to be really, really interesting from your counselor perspective, because of the fact that you have to address both, right? So what was it like to be an African-American woman in the military, now a veteran seeking services? So that also is going to be implicated by, you know, what kind of services are they going to be going through the VA? Where are they located? Are these resources readily available? Another consideration will be, what branch were they in, right? So branches, they really vary, they differ. MOS, which is their military occupation specialty, is going to even impact this further, because were they one of many women in their group? Were they one of many African Americans in their group? Were they one of many African American women in their group or in their occupation within the military? So this idea of, they call it brotherhood, sisterhood, our unit, our team, their experience is going to be very different based on what their military experience was, which will lead into that transition period. There are some military connected that, you know, are transitioning as a veteran, and they do not want to go the VA route. They want to go only to civilian. So knowing that background, the context, is going to be so important. So once again, I truly, truly, truly stress that the importance of doing that biopsychosocial intake, it is going to be your saving grace because of the fact that if you do your homework, you're going to know where to go. If you don't know your homework, right, you're going to be kind of lost and you're going to be trying to juggle this maze. Do your homework, have them lead you there. They are the expert. And then that will be where and how you navigate.
Absolutely.
Well, I see that we are out of time. So I know I personally, and I know Erika, we are just so grateful to have you guys here. We kept talking about, we hope this still happens with everything going on in the world. So thank you so much for being here and supporting us. And, you know, we look forward to seeing you guys along this conference journey in Zoom. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. This presentation is supposed to be recorded and uploaded into, they have a YouTube channel. It should be up there in about 2 weeks, they said. And then just remember, if you're looking for CEs, to fill out that link. It's on the last page of the program for the evaluation of your session, so you can get your CEUs.
You stole my speech. Great job. No, this was awesome. Yeah, exactly. This was a great presentation. It was recorded. I'm going to stop recording right now. But all